The high combat readiness of modern armies is determined not only by striking power. There are more intelligent weapons. For example, against every missile, even a very fast one, a means of early detection, radar stations, radars, is created. If they are promptly neutralized, anti-aircraft missile systems, SAM, become blind, which means they are absolutely powerless. To prevent the destruction of their radars, countries are creating even more advanced radars, masking them with electronic warfare, EW, and equipping them with more advanced air defense systems. Satellites are included in the defensive system. This layered cake of defense increases in scale until a new weapon appears, for which the layered cake of layered defense is no longer an obstacle. And then, you need to create a new defensive concept. Navy's new missile could make non-stealth fighting. In service with the United States, such a tool appeared. We're talking about AARGM-ER, or AGM-88G missiles, which are capable of passing through the echeloned enemy defenses just like a knife cuts through grandma's pie. For simplicity, we will use the shorter AGM-88G. In fact, the AGM-88G is an intelligent aircraft weapon. The launched missile first detects the radiation of various enemy radio-electronic means, and then strikes the radar stations of the anti-aircraft missile systems. That is, the AGM-88G missiles are given the right to first strike. After the first hits, the second shock echelon enters the battle, destroying already ground targets, equipment, and manpower of the enemy. Even if the enemy turns off the radiation source during the missile's flight, the missile's onboard equipment memorizes the coordinates of the target, and the AGM-88G continues its mission to the target. The spread of hitting accuracy is only a few meters. However, the power of the high explosive fragmentation warhead is sufficient to disable objects around it. So what is known about the new American missile? AGM-88G is a representative of a fairly old family. The first representative of this class of missiles was the AGM-88 HARM, but AGM-88G was developed on the basis of a later member of the family, AGM-88E. However, we are talking about a major restructuring of the original design, which appeared back in the 80s. Unification is needed in order to put into service a new product as soon as possible. AARGM-ER does not require major changes in the design of the media. The new rocket is compatible with existing carrier aircraft, and this is very good because the existing weapons are gaining new advantages. For example, the U.S. Navy can use the FA-18E F fighter and the Boeing EA-18G Growler electronic warcraft aircraft as a carrier. Thus, the service life of these aircraft can be extended. Also, AGM-88G will be included in the ammunition load of the 5th generation F-35 fighter, its air carrier version. In the case of the Lightning, it is possible to take on board up to 4 AGM-88Gs. The missiles are placed in the inner compartments of the aircraft. Thanks to networked information capabilities, American aircraft can launch AGM-88G missiles even before they detect a target, while relying on information transmitted from other sources. Despite the high degree of unification with the AGM-88E, the new AGM-88G has a different layout and equipment. The AGM-88G rocket has a cylindrical body with a diameter of 11.5 inches, which is 10% more than the AGM-88E rocket. Of the planes, only the tail rudders remained. On the outer surface, there are 2 side gargrados. The layout has also changed slightly. The homing head is located in the head compartment, followed by the warhead. The rest of the space is occupied by the engine. Steering mechanisms are arranged around the nozzle apparatus. To increase the range, the designers used a new engine, a solid propellant double-thrust rocket engine. It was for this that the diameter and length of the case had to be slightly increased. The motor takes up half the length of the body, but the range increased to 200 miles. The U.S. Navy does not disclose the exact data. The new unit gives the rocket a sufficiently powerful thrust at the start, but at the same time maintains a high speed in flight when air resistance appears. The concept resembles a multi-stage rocket scheme, only without discarding modules, but with sequential combustion of different types of fuel. The placement of instruments on board the AARGM-ER has also changed. The wider body had to be taken into account. The new rocket has satellite and inertial navigation devices, an autopilot, and a passive and active radar seeker. The search for the target is carried out in a passive mode. At the final stage of the flight, the active mode is switched on for more accurate targeting. Data on the progress of the missile's flight is received by the pilot of the carrier aircraft until the last moment of its meeting with the target. Thus, the pilot knows for sure whether the missile hit the target or was destroyed at the very last moment. The main rival of the AARGM-ER is considered to be the Russian Pantsir C-1 and Buk M2E, from which in 2014, in the skies over Donbass, the Russians shot down a Malaysian Boeing 777 flight MH17. But there are examples of effective combat use of Russian air defense systems. In August 2021, the Syrian air defense system, using the Buk M2E and Pantsir C-1 complexes, destroyed 21 of the 24 missiles fired by the Israeli Air Force. Obviously, the new AARGM-ERs won't be such an easy target. The seeker is protected from interference. As already mentioned, the AARGM-ER continues its mission even after the first signal disappears. The main customer of the AARGM-ER missiles was the US Navy, which planned to re-equip the carrier-based aircraft. Later, the US Air Force joined the program. They are now interested in receiving AARGM-ERs for their F-35A fighters. Even the ground forces were interested in the project. Northrop Grumman has exhibited a ground-based launcher for the AARGM-ER in the form of a standard container. It is not yet known whether such a modification will be introduced. The main approval for the production of the AARGM-ER long-range anti-radar missile came from the US Navy. Therefore, AARGM-ER was created primarily in the interests of this department. Deck-based fighter bombers and electronic warfare aircraft will be able to use AARGM-ER to destroy surface or coastal targets, ship and land radars for various purposes, including those from enemy air defense systems. Thus, even aircraft that do not have a high degree of stealth can safely take on functions that were previously available only to inconspicuous fighters. The combat mission looks like this. A carrier aircraft with AARGM-ER missiles is heading to a safe line outside the enemy's air defense zone. After receiving data about the object, the rocket is activated. Such data is a unique signal of one of the enemy radar objects. The collection of such personal signs is done in advance. To do this, the US Navy and Air Force have entire squadrons. After the launch of the rocket, the carrier aircraft continues to receive data on the progress of the rocket movement. If the missile is found and destroyed, the pilot will immediately know about it. If the AARGM-ER has successfully broken through the echelon of protection and approached the target, it immediately activates the active mode for a more accurate hit. This is the final phase before the target is destroyed. After the explosive mechanism is triggered, the pilot of the carrier aircraft immediately learns about it. In general, the AARGM-ER has become a more convenient and effective aircraft weapon. It combines the best modern developments in radar homing heads and engines. AARGM-ER combines flight and combat characteristics. If necessary, the warhead can consist of a nuclear charge. The flight range became a particularly serious case for the enemy's concern. The radar indicator makes it possible to use missiles far from enemy positions. The enemy will have to use longer-range air defense systems capable of spotting, capturing, attacking, and hitting the aircraft carrier. Otherwise, the air defense system will have to catch a faster target, a rocket. And this is more like a lottery. After all, the elements of stealth are implemented in the body of the rocket. In addition to the function of storing the coordinates of a detected target, another important advantage of the AARGM-ER is constant two-way communication with the carrier. As already mentioned, the missile can transmit data about the target being attacked and the results of the attack. That is, the AARGM-ER is both a weapon and a reconnaissance vehicle. According to its data, it is possible to clarify and assess the current situation. Even with an unsuccessful attack, the pilot of the carrier aircraft will already have data on the location of the enemy's emitting objects. This means that this information will also be available to the Operation Control Center, where they can make a decision on the use of more effective weapons. The American command is considering the use of the AGM-88G in the A280 scenarios. It is about the concept of deterring the enemy by creating an increased danger for the deployment or movement of their forces. The A280 scenario is implemented in locations protected by integrated air and missile defense systems or surface-to-surface missile launchers. For example, the Kaliningrad region has been identified as one of the most important zones A2AD. The Crimea Peninsula, which was captured by Russia in 2014, belongs to the same category. The S-400 and S-300 anti-aircraft missile systems are located there. Bastion and Iskander are deployed in the same regions. AGM-88G is one of the elements of the system which is tasked with breaking through such multi-level protection systems. Therefore, Poland officially requested information from the United States about the price and the possibility of supplying AGM-88G missiles. And NATO forces are conducting exercises in the Black Sea in the Crimea region. The development of the AARGM-ER missiles represents the next step in modernizing the existing AARGM missile. Orbital ATK started developing the AGM-88G back in 2015. The project was then taken over by Northrop Grumman Corporation, which acquired the developer and made Orbital ATK part of its Northrop Grumman Innovation Systems division. AGM-88G tests took place at test ranges in the Atlantic, on the Patuxent River, at the Point Mugu and China Lake Naval Air Bases. The launches were recognized as successful, so the AGM-88G is about to begin being supplied to the troops. The American military plans to overcome air defense systems not only with the help of anti-radar missiles. Hypersonic aeroballistic missiles are being tested. Stay tuned to be the first to know about new products.